us today. And before we begin, I will read to you a short bio of Professor Michael Brook. He is a professor emeritus of chemistry and chemical biology and distinguished university professor emeritus at McMaster University in Hamilton, Canada. He is an expert in silicon, silica, and silicon chemistry. He wrote the solely authored book Silicon, Inorganic, Organometallic, and Polymer Chemistry in 2000, published by Wiley. And he has published over 315 papers and has 12 granted patents. His main interests revolve around the strategies to improve the sustainability of polymers using silicon chemistry. He is CSO of Neopara Materials and En-route Interfaces, both focused on utilizing waste as a resource in materials chemistry, which fits with his current research on using natural materials to make silicon elastomers biodegradable in the environment. So join me welcoming Professor Michael Brook.
Do I need to use the mic? Do I need to use the microphone because of the recording?
I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thanks to Kyle for the invitation. This is my second chance to visit Campinas. I really like you guys. It's very interesting. I have never been to Brazil until 18 months ago. I had no idea what to expect. It's interesting and exciting on so many levels. And you're very friendly. I want to thank you for that as well. That's not the normal introduction, I get it, but I have spent the last 24 hours, well, I did have a few hours sleep, just talking to people, and everybody's so open and friendly, so you're making it fun. So thanks a lot for that. As Mariana mentioned, much of our research is about sustainability, and that's also becoming more important in Brazil. One of the things that links Canada to Brazil, well, both are really big countries. That's one thing. So if I want to go to the West Coast, it's a 5-hour flight. And if I want to go to the East Coast, it's a 3.5-hour flight. So Canada is sort of much longer than Brazil, but Brazil is also enormous, but more circular. So there are few people per kilometer compared to many countries in the world. And that means a lot of natural resources available, which I think both countries try to exploit in different ways. And part of the lecture today is to say, what can we do to take advantage of those resources and also to do things which are more sustainable? And I'm going to start, in fact, much of this lecture is about food. I like to eat, and I've been enjoying that part of Brazil as well. The title of the lecture was Ask a Local Farmer. And one of the reasons for that is we know if you take a natural material and drop it outside today, it will be gone. Maybe one day, 1 month, 1 year, because nature knows how to deal with that. Fundamentally, that means it's sustainable, right? So can we take advantage of things that are available, widely available, like food, and use them as a resource? So if anybody's had the pleasure of going to Japan, has anybody had the pleasure to go to Japan? Okay. It's fantastic. But unlike Brazil, when you walk by the restaurant, outside in the window will be these examples of the food you can get inside. It's 100% silicone. It's not food, it's silicone. It's a kind of art. For example, you can make a mold. Silicone is very good at making molds. Somebody wants to make Oreo cookies, they make a mold. But that's not really silicones, combining them with food. More commonly, when you combine silicones with food, you are actually using the silicone as a basket to carry food, or you can bake bread inside the silicone for its temperatures, high thermal stability. So still not food. There is one example where people actually on purpose eat silicones, and that's when you have indigestion. So here's an example of, you can see it in the video, of a defoaming experiment, that silicones are extremely good at breaking foams for two reasons. One, silicones migrate to the air interface of a bubble, and then they usually add silica, which has little points to it on the outside, which then can break the bubble. So little bubbles become big bubbles, and then the foam collapses. And you can eat this. If you have a bad meal, you have indigestion, you have gas, then you take simethicone. This is an example. It's so safe that you can give it to children. That's it was then 3-month-old grandson. He had terrible indigestion. He had a stomach out to here with gas. So we gave him silicone, not because I do silicone in the lab, but it relieved the pain. My own personal experience with silicone defoamers is a little different. The beer in Brazil is fantastic, and it's quite typical. Last night, you get a really big head of foam on top of the beer, then you know it's a good one. I was touring a silicone company, so we all went for a beer after work. Everyone takes a sip of their beer. Everyone else has a lot of head on their beer. Not Mike. Whoops, where it's gone there. Mike, immediately I lose the head on the beer. What happened? I was walking through the lab. Some silicone is on my mustache. Drink the beer, transfer it, defoaming. So silicones can be food. All right, that's not really the essence of this lecture. The essence of the lecture is, if you need a silicone for roof coating or an adhesive or some other kind of device, could we use other things to reduce the cost of silicones? The cost financially, how many dollars per kilogram, but also the carbon footprint. So this is the silicone cycle. In school, we all learned about the nitrogen cycle, the carbon cycle. This is the silicon cycle. Silicon in commerce starts as sand, and then the silicon-oxygen bonds are really strong. And in order to do processing, the first step is to break all 4 bonds between silicon and oxygen and make silicon metal. So silicon metal is used in solar panels, in computer chips. There are many applications, but it costs a lot of energy to do that. Second step is to then take the silicon metal and add carbon bonds to it and to replace some of the oxygen bonds. So this is a typical silicone, silicon, oxygen, with methyl groups on the silicon, which make it kind of greasy. It's hydrophobic material. Depending who you talk to, the cost from sand until silicones is between 6, but more likely 22 kilograms of carbon dioxide per kilogram of silicone. So the carbon footprint is enormous. Here in Brazil, Dow Chemical has got a plant where they're using eucalyptus. You are world experts in this. Actually, you really pissed off the Australians because they want to be the only people that have eucalyptus. But then the Malaysians pissed you off over rubber, so it's kind of a fair deal, right? Yeah, because Havea Brasiliensis, they would say Havea Malaysiensis or something. Okay. But in any event, they used eucalyptus as their carbon source. They are keeping track of the forest. It doesn't change its footprint. They have next to it native rainforest, which they do not touch, like they are being responsible. And even then, it's only 9 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per CO2. So it's a very high footprint. After all of that, okay, there's lots of silicone processing. Hey, how many people have ever touched a silicone polymer? Have you ever touched one? Okay, wrong. Everybody in this room has touched the silicone. You're sitting on a fabric treated with silicone, okay? You probably put it on your face or your armpits or your hair, and everybody has been to the washroom, so that silicone rubber is there. You've seen it. It's all over the place. Where can we reduce the carbon footprint? Nobody has succeeded at the top of this, so we think there are two ways of dealing with it. One, some silicones are going to end up in the environment. If it's rubber, rubber does not degrade very easily. Look at rubber tires, car tires, they don't degrade. Silicones are not as bad, but not good. So we want to make the materials, when they enter the environment, better degradable. That should help with the circularity. But maybe, secondly, we can maybe reuse them a lot before we actually throw them into the environment. Maybe we can dilute that silicone footprint by adding natural materials. And that's what I want to mostly spend my time talking about. Let's take natural materials. And so far today, what have I talked about? Whey and starch and gelatin, and I can't remember what else, but why not put those into silicones? Even if it only dilutes the silicone content. Because there's lots of stuff around. So this is a picture from not far from San Carlos. There's sugarcane fields. That's a picture near my summer house in autumn, where you have the leaves are turning color. So you've got cellulose and lignin. I had lignin. There's another polymer that we saw earlier on this afternoon. I'm pretty sure that's manioc. Yeah, right, Yuka? I think so. That's starch, no problem. Lots of other saccharides, proteins, lipids. They are there. We are eating them. One question that comes up when I give this lecture is, you are taking the food out of people's mouth if you put it into that silicone. And my answer is, after they made 5,000 batches of French fries, then you can take the oil, right? Because nobody wants that to eat anymore. And so it's about using not food grade materials necessarily. It's about using food waste or food grade materials that have lost their efficacy, past their stale date, which would still allow them to dilute out a silicone. So let me give some examples. I gave a lecture last year in chemistry. So if any of you were there, I'm telling you, you should remember why I add the word last year. So that's a slide I already presented. So this is a test of your memory. Do you actually remember? But on one hand, it's an apology, but the other hand, it's to explain that there's a logic, I think, in some of these slides. I hope there is a logic in some of these slides. Earlier on, I was talking with you about imines, right? And so if you take an aldehyde, there's an aldehyde, and combine it with a nitrogen compound, an amine, you make a carbon-nitrogen double bond. That's called an imine. So I have to be careful. They're taking pictures of me. If I walk over here, they will get very upset. I have to go back into the center of the stage. Sorry. That imine is dynamic. If you heat the material up, it will melt, and then it will cool down again to give you a new elastomer. It's a thermoplastic elastomer. That's very advantageous. It's self-healing. That's very advantageous. But that's not why my students liked it. We took vanilla, so that's what vanillin is, vanilla. We made a dimer, so we have two aldehydes. That difunctional material plus a polyfunctional amine gives you these elastomers that smell like cookies. It's a vanilla. So when you walk into the lab, most chemistry labs don't have such a wonderful odor. This smells fantastic. What was interesting for us, in addition to the thermoplasticity, ability to reuse it, was its strength. So if I use a dialdehyde based on petroleum with a benzene ring, as you put more and more of the cross-linker in, you get a stronger and stronger material. No surprise. At the same cross-link density, however, the vanillin material is a much stronger elastomer because all of those OH groups, right? They are giving you hydrogen bonding. So on top of carbon bonding, so real covalent bonds, you have hydrogen bonding, which amplify the strength of the material. In North America, maybe here too, I mean, you are coming to summer, right? We are coming to winter. So now is the time of Halloween and pumpkins. And for some reason, Starbucks started to sell this pumpkin spice latte. I hate this. I don't like the smell, but okay, people go crazy about pumpkin spice latte. It comes from that molecule called eugenol, which is clove oil, which is antiseptic. It's really interesting. It's an antioxidant. So we wanted to know what happens if eugenol is part of a silicone. So very straightforward chemistry allows you to take that carbon-carbon double bond and make a real linkage to a silicone either at the end of the chain or along the backbone. And when it's along the backbone, we can have as much as 50 weight percent eugenol in the silicone. That's a lot. That's a lot of silicone that we displaced. Is it still an antioxidant? So we used a molecule called DPPH. This is this molecule here. It's purple. It's a radical. If it reacts with a phenol, it completely changes color to yellow. And we use this as a simple method to see if eugenol on a silicone is still an antioxidant. So these three curves, one of them is eugenol by itself, and the other two are eugenol either on the telechelix or the pendant polymer. It doesn't make any difference. It's still an antioxidant. So you can take a film of oil. Silicones love to make coatings. Put a drop of that fluid onto the surface of this desk. It will spread out. And now the surface is antioxidant for anti-corrosion on metal, for example. But as a fluid, it could wash away. So are there ways that we could, in addition to that, make it into a solid cross-linked film? So the answer is sure. As to many questions, ask nature how to do it. Humans, we claim to be so clever. We are so clever. We come up with such great ideas. But a lot of them are just, oh, nature did this, and now we can do it too, right? So now nature had a few more million years to do it, but okay. So as I tell my students, if you are going to steal ideas, okay, steal the good ones, right? And nature has lots of good ideas. And so the idea was that we look at lignin. So lignin is the brown material in wood. It's the very unusual polymer because it's cross-linked, it's a network, it's ill-defined. Nature usually makes well-defined. This one is a mess. It's highly aromatic, many phenolic groups, and the way that it is assembled inside the plant is that various phenols in the presence of an enzyme like lacase control the coupling of two phenolic groups. So you make a new carbon-carbon bond by phenolic oxidation. So the question was, if we take a silicone like this one, we put eugenol on the end, we expose it to those oxidative conditions, can we similarly get it to do what is a diradical coupling reaction to make a carbon-carbon bond? And it, for us at least, worked surprisingly well. If you take these pendant silicones, you have to heat it up. Like we are not, even if nature has good ideas, we are not as smart as nature, okay? So we're not doing this at room temperature with an enzyme. We're doing this at 120 degrees with a peroxide, but okay. Having said that, it's extremely easy to get those phenolic groups to couple. You start with a phenol, you end up with a phenol, so you should not lose your antioxidant properties, right? And that's exactly what we see. This is the curve for the oil I showed you on the previous slide. As you put in more and more crosslinks, for a while, there's a very small change in the antioxidant properties. Okay, then we overdo it. So you can take that oil, put it onto a surface, now cross-link it, and get a rubber surface, which is also an antioxidant, anti-corrosive material. But it all comes from pumpkin spice latte at 50% loading. So we are diluting out the cost of the silicone financially and also from greenhouse gases. So I'm going to show some other examples of that. This morning we talked about opening epoxides. I forget with you, yeah, with Natalie. So soybean oil is a natural material. There are many other vegetable oils that we could use to do exactly the same experiments. But we have done work directly with soybean oil or linoleic acid. Well, here's a question. I walked across linoleic acid to come to this theater. Where was that? Anybody know? It's the linoleum outside. Linoleum is cross-linked linoleic acid. You basically take vegetable oil like the one shown on the bottom, oxidize it, and now you make a floor coating, okay? So it's all natural. But we had trouble doing that with silicones. We did some experiments. So instead, we converted them all to epoxides. And then we found out you don't even need to do the work. You just buy it. It costs nothing to buy soybean or other vegetable oils already converted to epoxides. We needed some synthetic groups to allow us to graft on the silicones. So for us, this was the addition of acrylic acid. In the literature, people will tell you you need strong acidic conditions or mineral acids or very special acids. We use nothing. At 120 degrees, you get essentially quantitative conversion of the epoxide to what is an acrylic alcohol. So now we've got a polyacrylic material, and you can do whatever you want, including radical polymerization if you want to. That's not our desire, but it certainly works very well. Instead, we did something called a Michael reaction. So that carbon-carbon bond can be attacked by an amine. You don't need a catalyst. I have taught green chemistry. Green chemistry says, don't do stoichiometric chemistry, use a catalyst, there will be less byproduct. Now I don't even need the catalyst. You just mix the two and you get the product. No byproducts. And the material is an elastomer. Here is why people in the silicone world don't like this idea. It's always yellow. Everything is yellow. Nature is always yellow and brown, right? And we don't like yellow and brown as humans. We have different ideas about what color things should be. So yellow and brown are not great. People also don't like the fact that next year's crop of soybean oil is different from this year's crop of soybean oil by a little bit. Eugenol is different. Eugenol is the same. It's distilled from clove oil. So the other thing they don't like is it's opaque. Silicones are normally clear. You can see right through them. But the refractive index of organic oil and of silicone oil are completely different. So it's opaque. If you're using it to coat an outside building, nobody cares. They won't see it in normal circumstances. So there's another way. Sorry, I'm going to go backwards. Up to 75% of our silicone can be oil. However, it's not homogeneously distributed. Silicones love to go to air interfaces. When you rub silicone cream on your arm or on your hands, you feel that nice silky feeling. That's because the silicone is not penetrating. It wants to be adjacent to the air bubble. That's why it works as a defoamer. So when we cure these materials, there is an enhanced layer of silicone at the air interface, and the soybean oil is down below. So if you want something that behaves as a silicone, you get that. Okay, here again, I showed something last year. I can go through it pretty quickly. It picks up on my argument that hydrogen bonding is something we shouldn't ignore. So if you take a silicone, which is very hydrophobic, in this case, there is only one nitrogen on each end. Otherwise, it's entirely silicone oil, completely water repellent, and we simply graft 1 unit of glucose on each end. Just a little bit of glucose. In fact, a little bit means less than 0.1 weight%. So this is a very bad surfactant because it's not got enough polar groups. If I drop, you're going to see me drop a ball through the starting material, through the amine, and what you see is that the ball does nothing, okay? There, it's viscous fluid, but not very viscous. Now I add 0.1 weight percent, the chain length of the silicone. Just to be clear, there are 670 monomer units and 1 sugar on each end. So that's 300 silicone units per sugar. But if I drop the same ball onto the top of the surface, it's all the energy is absorbed. And it works even from 1 meter up with a much bigger ball. But it's not a rubber. Because if I wait 15 minutes, the balls have sunk down to the bottom. It's a temporary rubber. So where do you use things like that? These are called working fluids in a clutch in your car. You know, you put pressure on and you have to have a change in the viscosity as 2 plates approach one another. So that could be a useful idea. If you go the other way, not 600, but only 40 or 50, now there's too much sugar. You actually have a rubber at room temperature. It doesn't do anything. It actually shatters if you try and put pressure on it. But if we take, sorry, that was shorter. Now we take 60 and we dilute it with silicone oil. So at a 10% loading, it behaves more or less as the one you saw before. All the energy is absorbed. But I love this one because at 30% loading, what happens is it bounces back. And we could measure the crosslink density, not by swelling, but by how high did the ball bounce. So we have a nice plot in this paper showing that you can underdo it and overdo it. And then there's a maximum amount where hydrogen bonds are holding together these sugars under pressure. But if you take away the pressure, then they're not strong enough to hold it together. So it's a transient or temporary elastomer. Okay, I said all that last year. This is kind of a cooking show, right? So what's the only thing you know how to do with sugar? Make caramel, right? So we did that experiment. We have a paper right now. We'll see whether it gets accepted. The early reviews are okay. But the idea was to take that, pardon me, sorry. The danger is I talk too much to you and don't listen enough. Okay. So what we did was we took the same material. It's just got a little bit of sugar. And unsurprisingly, the longer you heat it, the more caramelization takes place. And the more caramelization, the more viscous is the material. And if you think about this, this would be, or at least this is what our argument, where would this be useful? Where you have to do a small seal or you have to fix something, and you put in this fluid that you can sort of inject where you need it, and then heat it up till it's cured? No, till it's the right color, because you know it's also cured, right? So you don't need a high technical degree of skill to make this work. And what you are seeing here is that we get a crossover in the storage and loss modulus, which tells us, yes, it's behaving as an elastomer. That's all I wanted to show. So you can dial in different degrees of viscoelastic or of elasticity simply by heating it. In that case, we don't have the opportunity to claim dilution of silicone. It's only 0.1%, but small amounts of material can have huge changes in properties which could be beneficial. So what else could nature do for us? So twice I've pushed hydrogen bonding on you. I want to give one further example. I mean, I don't know how much people are drinking wine in Brazil. I think the beer is so good that maybe, anyway. Do people drink a lot of wine? When I'm in South America, I'm drinking Chilean wine or Argentinian wine. Don't know about Brazilian wine, but there's a big debate. If you're going to have an expensive wine, do you put it into wood casks made from American oak or from French oak? So the French say French, the Americans say American, the Australians kind of do both. I don't know what the Chileans do. Why do they do that? They do that because there are these molecules called tannins, which are phenols, that are in the oak, which do two things. They leak into the wine and change the actual flavor profile of the wine. But the other thing they do is change the fermentation process. So we said, look, this is a phenol. We know hydrogen bonding works. How many people are actually chemists in the room? Oh, lots of chemists. Good. Let me ask you, what's the pKa of a phenol? Oh, I'm sorry, sir. What's the pKa of a phenol? Does anybody know? 20? Around 20? Here's a worse question for the engineers. What's the pKa of water? They always say 7. It's not. It's 15.5. It's about 10, actually. It's much less. It's 10. It's more acidic than water. What's the pKa of an ammonium ion? About 10. So if I take an amine plus a phenol, I will make some population of ammonium ions. And that's what I'm trying to show here, is there can be a hydrogen bonding between a phenol and an amine, but there also can be a real ionic bond, but it will be temporary. If the two materials are close, it's an ionic bond. If they drift apart, it's no bond at all. And what we were able to show is that at about 20% of this tannin material, again, we got a very nice thermoplastic elastomer. But unlike most rubbers, when you are ready to degrade it, all you do is add a small amine. Now the small amine competes with the big amine. The whole thing falls apart. You filter off the tannin and it can be reused. So you get reusability. And if it ends up in the environment, it's a tannin. Nobody cares. Silicones degrade in the environment. Silicone oil. We don't know about aminosilicones. So here's a paper some of you will be familiar with. So this is Kayo's paper, which I was very interested to read. And I was interested because on my last visit, I went to Embrapa, I think, yeah, where he and Matoso and a bunch of people were making a bunch of films from a variety of natural products. So the ones that we received samples of in Canada were alginate and pectin and gelatin. So why were these attractive to us? If you buy my argument that an amine plus a phenol will make ionic bonds, or an amine plus an acid will for sure make ionic bonds, we should be able to take things like alginic acid, the acid form, or pectin to just make silicone conjugates. Gelatin's a bit trickier, and I'll come back to that at the end of the lecture. So here's the concept. You take the films that we were provided, so we didn't do anything, we just received the film, which have, I'm allowed to say what the plasticizer is, right? So the plasticizer to make it possible to make the nice films is glycerol. So glycerol is basically the smallest sugar, right? So everybody's happy with that. And we literally added a solution of the amine in isopropanol and painted it onto the surface of this film and let the isopropanol dry. And now when you put a drop of water on there, the contact angle of the water is about 90 to 100, a little bit more in some cases. These are not perfectly smooth films, I have to say, but they're very hydrophobic. And what's interesting is, in most cases, the water droplet evaporates before it penetrates through the silicone. But there's no chemical bonding. Again, if we wash it with enough isopropanol, we can wash the silicone away. So all of the benefits that you guys talked about in that review and that we've talked about before for those natural material films, those are still there, but the added hydrophobicity might give you better utilization in food packaging or something like that, where you want to make sure the water doesn't too quickly get to your package, right? If the package dissolves between the time you buy it at the store and the time you eat your lettuce, that's a problem, right? So this just gives you maybe a little bit more time. We talked earlier about starch today, and this is something that's available in enormous quantities. It doesn't cost very much. It's actually a surprisingly easy material to work with. For us, the biggest problem is silicones hate water, starch loves water. And how do we find a medium in which we can put both of them together? Well, sometimes you are lucky, and this was one case. We were doing chemistry for a completely different reason, using a boron catalyst, which has carbon-fluorine bonds. It doesn't pass the sustainability test. But it was interesting. You literally take a silicone, a commercial silicone that has silicon hydrogen on it, and you literally mix it with starch that's dispersed in isopropanol, or in, maybe, no, that can't be isopropanol. I don't even remember what the solvent was. Toluene, maybe even in toluene. And what happens is the hydrogen that's in there on the silicon reacts with a proton on the starch, you get hydrogen gas, and you get these foams, these rigid starch foams. Again, in about 25 to 50, sometimes 60 or 70% starch. And that video you saw was, it burns, but not like starch, because the silicone turns to silica and it acts as a thermal insulator. So we have a chance to use it in different applications, maybe in acoustic insulation or something. But the other one, which is more relevant from our discussion this morning, is you can take that product, which is the Diels-Alder adduct of cyclopentadiene and maleic anhydride. And in our university, that's free because undergraduates make that compound every year in their laboratories. So we have kilos of this stuff. Okay, so why not use it? So we do use it. And in that case, we now do chemistry where the starch opens up the anhydride. So we make a real covalent bond. And now it's easy to make 70% starch silicone films that have a high contact angle. If it's 70% starch, water is not repelled. The water goes inside. There's opacity. It goes from sort of translucent to white, and then the water evaporates and it comes back out. So we can easily take advantage of the low cost of starch. That particular product, I don't find an application for yet, but I still like the concept. If we're going to do proteins, one of the challenges with proteins, we were talking about this earlier today, is denaturation. So when you take ovalbumin, right, in the egg white before cooking and after cooking, it's completely different. Most of us prefer it in that form to eat, not everybody, but and once you've gone to that side, it's not going back. Of course, heat can be a way of denaturing proteins. Certain chemicals will denature proteins. Silicones will denature proteins. They really hate hydrophobic matrices. Why? Because a protein has hydrophobic areas. Where is it, the hydrophobic part? Inside the protein. But if you give it a hydrophobic interface, the protein now will open up so that the hydrophobe inside the protein is attached to the external hydrophobe, in this case, silicone. And what you're seeing is changes in activity or naturation of the protein just by shaking with some silicone oil. So if you need a natured protein, that can be problematic. Having said that, we also developed 30 years ago some oral vaccines based on proteins and silicones that you either would eat, ingest, or inhale that worked really well. So they don't always denature proteins. But this led us to start thinking, putting silicones into proteinaceous environments that involve sulfurs. The next few slides are going to be taking advantage of some well-known sulfur chemistry. And again, I showed this to some of you last year. Everybody's blood has albumin, not ovalbumin, that's in chickens, but human serum albumin. It's the most abundant protein in your blood, and it has a lot of sulfur, but 6 of the thiols, I guess it would be 12 of the thiols, are tied up as disulfide bonds. So that's this sulfur-sulfur linkage. It's over there. And that's a very mild process. The body in nature handles this extremely easily. So we said, could we play that game with silicones? So we buy silicones. We actually buy this material. It has sulfur already on it. You add an oxidation agent that leads to now the disulfides. Then you can use a chemistry that we developed to cleave those sulfur-sulfur bonds to give you back a silicone oil, but actually you have to add water. So these 3 steps take you to first an elastomer, and the video is the degradation. First, a really nice silicone elastomer. Then you break it back into oils, and that 3-reaction process is 95% isolated yield. Okay, I've done a lot of synthesis in my life. We never get 95%, 5 times in a row. I mean, it's a very, very easy reaction because nature knows how to do it. I mean, it's not us. Again, we go back to nature. So why not exploit this more broadly with biological entities? So one I want to talk about is lipoic acid. That's also in every one of your cells. It's a generic reducing agent because it goes from the cyclic disulfide to the ring-opened dithiol. That's happening right now inside of you. If you heat it up, So for the polymer people in the room, if you heat it up, it undergoes a ring opening polymerization. So no catalyst needed, so that the backbone is 3 carbons, 2 sulfurs, repeat. But of course, it's still a disulfide. So if you take your polymer, your thermally generated polymer, and add a reducing agent like dithiothreatol, you get the monomer back. So it's completely recyclable and a natural material. To make a silicone conjugate, we did the same kind of game. We did now traditional amide formation between an alcohol and an amine with DCC, or I guess it was something else, DCI. And that should have led to this, but at room temperature, the presence of the amine was enough to already cause the ring opening polymerization to take place. So we made elastomers. So you have a silicone interspaced with this poly lipoic acid material. And they were pretty interesting because they're thermoplastic. We can heat them up, they melt, we can cool them down. We more or less get the same properties. This green and blue bar is the Young's modulus before and after being heated and cooled. So we're not changing this properties. They behave like silicones. There's some other advantages. Anybody who's ever been in production in a company knows you make bad batches, right? Here's the design, here are the reagents, we made it for the last year exactly the same way, and today we get a bad result. What do? Landfill it. No. In this case, because those sulfur-sulfur bonds are dynamic, we can add in a new silicone with a different chain length and either increase or decrease the cross-link density. You just heat it up and cool it down. But the real advantage is now we can take a silicone elastomer and reduce it all the way back to a monomer under mild conditions, which again is attractive. We can make silicone lipoic acid materials that are 60, 70% lipoic acid, but we can get rid of them at the end of the day. This is not food, but it was we were working for a company that does hair coloring, okay? So all of a sudden we got very interested in the sulfur chemistry on your head. And one of the things that happens is that your body has these thioesters that are actually binding stuff to the surface of your hair. So we thought we will play the same game. We will cleave those esters, and then we will do silicon chemistry of a variety of kinds and chemically graft the silicone onto your hair. So we did all that, not my hair. This is Lucy, the alpaca, who kindly provided us with her wool. What's important is the farmer who we worked with said 70% is high enough quality to make clothes, and the other 30% is garbage. It's landfilled, no use known. So that's what we took. And the wool is about 6 centimeters long on average. So we looked at that, but most of it we cut down to, 1 or 2 millimeters. So it was a manageable material. Threw it into the silicone, and we made dog bones and started to look at the performance. So wool as a very lightweight filler. Traditional fillers in silicones are sand and calcium carbonate, and very heavy, very dense. This is extremely lightweight material. And what was interesting is when we took our chemically modified material, here's the stress strain curve, and you can see with 20%, we get around 0.25 or something like that. 20% when we just washed the wool, we didn't do anything. We just washed the wool, like washing your hair. It was almost the same, right? We had almost the same benefit because silicones like hair, like we talked about earlier, people are using it in shampoo and conditioner and so on because it leaves your hair soft and silky, right? And so it happens even if you don't do all that fancy chemistry. But what was more interesting is if we took the real fiber, the 6 centimeter long fiber, now at only 10%, right? Now it's 10 times stronger than this chemically modified one because of the aspect ratio, the entanglement provided by your filler gives you extra strength, at least if you're doing tensile measurements. So here's a benefit that comes out of it. It's wool. If we make materials and throw them in the environment, if the silicone will degrade, nobody's worried about the wool. You had a South American Pope until recently, right? That was a big deal. I know he wasn't the Brazilian, but almost close enough, at least in South America, right? That's better. So that's no longer the case. So there was of course, the big transition in the Sistine Chapel to choose the new Pope. And it started me thinking about this. You have a three-dimensional structure in the Sistine Chapel, which is extremely beautiful. What would a three-dimensional structure made out of Sistine look like? It would be the different kind of Sistine Chapel. Could we play games using sulfur to create architectures that are interesting? Okay, we're not that clever. So we went to a protein that is now produced in excess, because in North America, everyone is allergic to gluten. You know, it's gluten-free water, gluten-free air, like it's gone bananas, right? So what do you do with all that gluten? How many people here have made bread in their life? Okay, not that many, okay. But you've seen movies of people, you mix the water and the flour and the salt, whatever, and then you knead it, right? You have to knead the dough. What are you doing when you're kneading the dough? What you're doing is taking disulfides and cross-linking them in the presence of air to give, thiols to give disulfides. In other words, you are adding cross-links. What happens if you over-knead the bread? It's over cross-linked. It doesn't hold the bubbles anymore. What happens if it's under cross-linked? It doesn't hold the bubbles anymore, right? So this is well known. So the concept is, let's play that game. But instead of using just gluten, we'll take those thio-modified silicones and make the disulfide as a mechanism to graft reversibly, to graft silicone onto gluten. That was the idea. So what you're seeing along here, along the bottom, just look on the bottom. On the far left is 100% gluten. On the far right is 100% silicone, thiopropyl silicone modified. And instead of using some fancy organic oxidant, what did we use? Hydrogen peroxide. Who taught us this? Bakers. Bakers get a certain kind of flour. They need to know how to make 100,000 loaves of bread per day. So they do testing, and sometimes they will pre-modify the bread so that they get the right cross-linking by just adding hydrogen peroxide. What's the byproduct of that reaction? Water. Who cares? Nobody, right? So we can make a cross-linked silicone similar to the one I showed you, just using hydrogen peroxide. And the reason you can see some little bubbles and so on is because those droplets of water are hard to get rid of sometimes. In between, you have between 25 and 75% of the silicone. They all make really nice elastomers. They're opaque. They can be a little bit yellow. So they have surface properties of silicone. The remaining properties are kind of hydrogels, because if the protein is hydrated, it behaves one way. If you take away the water, it behaves a different way. What about getting rid of the silicone? We do the reverse reaction, like I said before, but not the fancy chemistry that we were involved with. We asked the baker what to do. He said add vitamin C. So vitamin C is a reducing agent. It's an antioxidant, right? Same idea. And so you can go from this back to what is gluten in the aqueous phase. It's also undergoing degradation because internal disulfide bonds are cleaved. And it's hard to see, but there's oil floating on the surface of this because the silicone oil just falls apart. So here we can make 75% gluten with a lot of silicone properties, not the thermal properties. You try and make it, you get bread, right? That's not what we want, or something like bread. But for other lower temperature profiles, surface changes, they're held really well. An analogous reaction, coming back to the imine discussion that we had this morning, if you have an aldehyde, I mentioned, react it with an amine, you get an aminal, you get the imine. But with formaldehyde, it goes all the way to this is the aminal, that's the hemiaminal or carbanolamine. That stuff forms particularly well with formaldehyde. Everybody in the room should go, why are you talking about formaldehyde? It's a toxic molecule. I agree, but please hold that thought. I will solve the problem in a minute. We were very surprised to discover that if we took some silicone oil and put a drop of formaldehyde on the surface, it immediately skinned over. We got a droplet of water surrounded by rubber. And if you just mix them, they are initially white. And then after 2 or 3 hours, they go clear as the water goes out. And we got beautiful elastomers because the aminal that we're forming quickly will work even though the silicone is hydrophobic. Formaldehyde traditionally was used to cross-link proteins, right? So if you want to do biological testing or someone has died and you don't want to bury them today, you have to cross-link the proteins to slow down degradation. Formaldehyde is used for that. It's such a fast reaction, which is why it's toxic. What you see here on the left is a double barrel syringe. One side is formaldehyde, the other side is silicone. And what you're seeing is a real-time injection in water. And underneath is like these are 1 centimeter holes that we're going through. It's a bit hard to see. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's really difficult to see. Just too much illumination. Water is pouring out, but in real time, in a few seconds, we completely seal off this vessel. So you can cure silicone in less than 10 seconds underwater. That's really surprising. If you have a leak in your boat, that sounds good, right? Even with the formaldehyde. I mean, that would be nice. But it's a concept. And so what we said is let's play with that same concept. Here's the chemistry. The amine is reacting with the aldehyde to make the aminal. Let's replace some of those amines with amines coming from a natural material. In this case, it's gelatin. Except the cysteine could also participate. It's a bit unclear what will react under these circumstances. Nevertheless, if you just take gelatin, cook the way you did with if you've ever made, how many people made gelatin like for dessert with their mom? No cooks in this room, hardly any, just a few. Okay, here's how you do it. You open the package from the store, you add boiling water, you stir it till it dissolves, and put it in the refrigerator. And now you have Jell-O. Yeah, that's all we do. We add the gelatin, we add the water, we add silicone, which does not dissolve in water, but it disperses, and the gelatin acts as a surfactant to help it disperse. Then we add the formaldehyde, and you get hydrogels. And unsurprisingly, the more cross-links, the harder is the material. Okay, so we're making these aminal cross-links. And the reason we wanted to do this was to prove the principle that nature will recognize the gelatin. Okay, none of you, or hardly any of you, have made gelatin with fruit in it, but there are two fruits you cannot put into gelatin. Does anybody know what they are? Pineapple and kiwi. Why not? The gelatin doesn't set. Yes, that's right. And this is one of those experiments where we actually planned this knowing that that was the case. And what you see down here is a picture, it's really hard to see, of a piece of pineapple surrounded by uncured gelatin because it doesn't set. But if you take those elastomers that we had before that are 50% silicone, 50% gelatin, and you wait about a week, all the gelatin is degraded on the bottom and the silicone is floating on the top. Okay. So the concept is interesting. Nature will deal with it, but the formaldehyde is not interesting. And so I had a really clever student who said, we will play the same game as we did with the soybean oil. We took acrylics, and these are commercially available. There is a PEG-based acrylic. We spent a lot of time talking about PEG. You just buy it with an acrylic group on the end. Or I like this one because this is glycerol with 2 acrylic groups. So it's even more sustainable, shall we say. The amine does a nucleophilic addition to the beta position. So again, you get cross-linked materials. It doesn't happen in 5 seconds. It happens in about an hour. So you have to heat it up a bit more, but you get beautiful hydrogels. Do they degrade? So to answer that, the answer is yes. So when we do this using bromelain, the pineapple enzyme, what we find is this is the degree of degradation in 1 week as a function of the amount of silicone that's in there. So when we have 50% silicone, 10% silicone, it's all gone in 1 week. If you have 50% silicone, only half of it is gone in a week. But in 3 weeks, it's all gone. So we're degrading this gelatin with this different linker that hasn't got the toxicity issues. And to really try and test this, we worked with the city of Hamilton. So in Hamilton, every week, of course, they come to collect our garbage. They also come to collect green material. So everything left over from the kitchen, bones from meat and fat and anything, vegetables, all of that goes into a green bin. They collect it and they compost it. And they have these huge tunnels, 20 by 20 by 40 meters, They fill this full of this compostable material, and then it's allowed to undergo natural composting. The temperature increases to 60 to 70 degrees spontaneously. They don't add anything. Nature wants to, the bugs in there want to eat this, and they generate a lot of heat. But it's big scale, so they use these enormous trucks. So we put our samples into that industrial composting. If you take commercial silicone, after 1 month, it's gone through the composting, there is no change. The mass is the same. It's a little bit dirty. It's not sticky on the surface. Nothing. However, if you take the materials based on the formaldehyde, it's partly degraded. The mass increases like crazy. How do you increase the mass? It absorbs all of the organic materials nearby. It's very sticky. We made a kind of adhesive. But the ones derived from the end, these PEG or these glycerol-derived acrylates, they are 100% gone after 1 month. What happened to the silicone? I don't know. It's gone because the sample is that big for 1 gram of silicone. So we don't know yet. But this is the first example of compostable silicone elastomers we're aware of. So nature is delivering something. It's delivering biodegradability at end of life. And I said before, normal silicone oils also undergo degradation spontaneously in the environment in a few years. Not 450 years or 100 years like polyethylene, but a few years. Aminosilicones are a little bit different. That hydrophilic group should help, but nobody knows yet, so we have to find out. Okay, so I just wanted to try and give you this idea that sustainability is available for all of us doing polymer chemistry. There are compromises, right? So for example, nobody is going to make a rubber tire for their Fiat car that's got mixtures of gelatin and rubber in it because it will not meet the performance requirements. So we need to do something else for those difficult applications. But there are so many other applications that natural products widely available in Brazil could be utilized to still deliver the performance, right, for the specific applications. Drop the price, new markets for waste. What's wrong? What's bad about that? That's at least the hope. I have to say a few things. I mean, if you get indigestion doing all that, you have to take that silicone. I have to thank a lot of people, FAPESP, for helping me be here because you guys are paying for a lot of this. Thank you very much for that. That's a really big benefit. I have to thank NSERC, which is our Canadian equivalent of FAPESP, because for now decades I've been funded by them for some of our more traditional academic research. These two companies on the bottom here, Neopara, those are startup companies that we have that are about making sustainable materials using the silicon chemistry I know. And one of the supporters are people that are making glass beads for us to do that. The people who are doing the work, actually none of the people on that slide are here anymore except for that guy who's my research scientist of 25 years. I have no grad students anymore. I have co-op undergraduate students. They come 4 months at a time. So by definition, the projects have to be simpler, but they're fantastic. And they're the ones in the lab doing the work right now. I thank them. Finally, thank you very much again for the invitation and for listening.
Thank you, Michael, for this wonderful talk, really inspiring. So we are open for questions from the audience.
Except I talked too long. I was promising I would stop at 10:02, so I'm sorry. I apologize for that.
No, it's good.
That was her fault. You should have told me to be quiet. So,
thank you, Mike, for the nice presentation. I have a question about the stability of the silicone with the lipoic acid, because we try to do some things with lipoic acid and it is always self-polymerized. It's very strictly.
Silicone with maleic acid?
Lipoic.
Oh, lipoic
acid, yeah, because it is self-polymerization by light and by oxygen and everything.
So I was very excited when we did this work with lipoic acid, only to discover that Craig Hawker already had a paper in this area. It was even worse. Craig Hawker is not a silicone guy, but now he is. You know, Greg Hawker, silicone chemistry, lipoic acid. What we discovered, what he says, is that you need light and heat. We never saw polymerization with normal operating conditions. Once you get to the melting point, which is 60 or 70 degrees, okay, then it's gone. We just never saw any problems until that temperature. When we had an amine present, we were trying to graft, we were trying to make these simple monomers with an amide, but the amine already caused the ring opening polymerization at room temperature. So if you have traces of base, that might be enough to get it to go. But don't forget, do whatever you want. Let the bloody thing polymerize. Who cares? You're going to add a reducing agent, and now we know it's going to be vitamin C, not dithiothreatol. And then you get the dihydro compound, and it's extremely easy to get the dihydro compound to go back to the ring. So do all that, let it all go to hell, and then come back to the monomer and start again, would be my advice.
Thank you a lot, Michael. It was amazing presentation. It's really good to have you here. So I have two questions. One is really quick and the other a little bit more conceptual. The first is the aminols. Are they dynamic as the acetals or they are more stable? And the second question is if you envision different type of silicones, not with a backbone of silicon and oxygen, but maybe different atomic combinations, because the vast majority of silicones the backbones are silicon oxygen bonds. As you mentioned, they are super stable, but there are a different bond or a different atom that could be placed there instead of oxygen, maybe. Thank you.
So let me try to answer the first question first, which I think was about the, as you go from aldehyde to carbinolamine to imine to aminal, this is all in equilibrium conditions. So one thing, if it's an aliphatic aldehyde, it spends a lot more time as the aldehyde than if it's an aromatic aldehyde, which will be able to be stable, quite stable as the Schiff base. So the vanilla case, for example, that was really stable, no problems at all. Whereas if you try to do it from aliphatic aldehydes, forget about it. They are much more sensitive to hydrolysis. In other words, to the equilibrium, going back to the beginning. The real aminal, like I've talked to lots of people. I don't know the real answer to your question, but when people say stable, use formaldehyde, the trip is one way. It's not coming back. And I think with almost all of the other aliphatic or aromatic ones, it's eventually going to drift back if you put equilibrating conditions in there. Add a lot of water or solvent and you will drive the equilibrium, I think, but not with formaldehyde. The second question was about where to put silicones. There is a famous silicone sealant, which is a long chain PEG polymer with a trimethylsilyl group on the end. So this answers your question, right? In other words, I'm paying for PEG, which is 1/50th the price of silicone, but I get the silicone performance. That's what this whole lecture was trying to be about, actually, is what can we do to reduce the cost of the silicone component? That's an exception, of course. I don't think, and people have done this, where people have made rings that have silicon and oxygen and a bunch of carbon, and you can do ring opening polymerization, but you don't get silicone properties anymore. What you get is kind of greasy normal polymer, but it doesn't. So the better strategy, I think, is to take small, cheaper blocks of silicone and deliver them to the interface of interest. And then the backbone can be something else that has a reduced cost. I think that's a more likely strategy.
We have another question over there.
Oh, hi. Thank you for a presentation.
Thanks.
I have one question. I have worked for 2.5 years in a downstream process for vanillin to remove this brownish, yellowish color out of it. And as you said, it seems like everything in nature it has this tone. The idea was to get a white vanillin crystal. And because of this context, I'd like to hear again, what was your proposal with this material? What is the vanillin case that you proposed in the beginning of your presentation, please?
So one of my problems is I have hearing aids sitting in my hotel room. So that's my first comment, because I didn't really hear all of the details of that question. I apologize. So I got the color bit. I didn't get the exact, I'm sorry, the hell with the video. So you're going to have to just.
What is the
Don't
vanillin
even do that.
case?
Just tell me quickly.
What is the vanillin thing?
The vanillin. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. I can answer this. Thanks. I apologize. It's really silly to be well prepared and then leave all your equipment somewhere else. Okay. So have you ever used vanilla extract in cooking? What color is it? Black. It's actually black, brown, black, because you have oxidation. I don't know if you caught, in the case of the lignin, remember I took the lignin or the eugenol, excuse me, and showed that you could heat it up and you get phenolic coupling. That's what's also happening with vanilla spontaneously. And there's enough air oxidation or something that the vanilla is actually dimerizing. And when that happens a couple more times, it goes black. So if you want to remove color from those kinds of materials, you can get real pure vanillin. It might be slightly yellow. It's not brown at all. But now it's the old school of you put in activated charcoal and carbon and lose the heavier materials to and a lot of them to make it light yellow in color. What we found is when we did all of our degradations, in any of these cases, those constituents are way less than 1%. They're just incredibly dark. That's the problem. So I don't have a good answer for you about how to make this problem go away unless you do all of your experiments and the product is used exclusively in a nitrogen atmosphere. And then maybe you have a chance to just suppress oxidation. That's not a very helpful answer, but I think it's a realistic answer. When I was a kid, wow, when I was your age, in my 20s, people were really worried about newspaper turning yellow, right? You would get the newspaper on day one and it was a little bit off, but after a week or 2 weeks, it turned yellow. People spent enormous amounts of money to make newspaper, the cheapest paper of all, not turn yellow. How many people have read a newspaper on paper in the last week? Nobody, right? So part of it is put it into an application where nobody cares what the color is, a hidden application. But it's a legitimate question. If you want a bright red material, you can't use vanillin, and you can't probably pigment out the problem. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? No? Okay, so thank you, Michael, for this wonderful talk. And we have a coffee break now, and you can also discuss with Michael during the coffee break. Thank you.